expanding efforts towards humanitarian assistance in partnership with the AHA Center, humanitarian actors, and relevant partners of ASEAN and Myanmar. While this meeting is not an official and formal ASEAN meeting, we have noted that this is just an initial step on our continuing discussions and express our hope that Myanmar takes this opportunity to make concrete and demonstrable progress or benchmarks on the core points of the 5-point consensus, such as cessation of hostilities, constructive and inclusive national political dialogue, and expanding humanitarian assistance to all communities without discrimination. While we took note of the positive steps undertaken by Myanmar, there are some areas where the improvements can be had, such as on the cessation of hostilities, inclusive and constructive dialogue among concerned parties, and again, humanitarian assistance. As a special envoy of the ASEAN Chair in Myanmar, I stand ready to lend my support towards the goal of helping Myanmar find a peaceful and lasting solution to the crisis that is Myanmar-owned and Myanmar-led. Moving forward, it is my hope that this informal meeting will serve as an impetus for further engagement between ASEAN and Myanmar, especially grounded in the aims of the 5-point consensus. I am hopeful that this meeting will bring us closer to a peaceful and enduring solution to the situation in Myanmar. Thank you very much.
Excellency Seosak, please.
Thank you. Well, first of all, Thailand is pleased to host this informal meeting between the Foreign Minister of Myanmar and the ASEAN foreign ministers. I'd like to thank the Foreign Minister of the Philippines for sharing the meeting. I think we did have a very frank, candid, and constructive discussion with the Foreign Minister of Myanmar and also among ourselves on the way forward. As you know, Thailand support the approach of calibrated engagement. Engagement that we are calling for is a strategy to implement the 5-point consensus of ASEAN. I think all of us reaffirm our commitment to the 5-point consensus. But the key issue here is what is the strategy to implement the 5-point consensus. And I want to emphasize that this calibrated re-engagement is a two-way street. It's us reaching out, hearing what they have to say, listening to the latest developments. But at the same time, the Myanmar side has to reach out as well to address the concerns of ASEAN and the concerns of the international community, because what we want is peace and stability in Myanmar. And, you know, we were given a briefing by the Foreign Minister of Myanmar with regard to what they are doing regarding on the peace process, political peace process, and also some other issues like suppressing scam operations along the border. And they also indicated what would be the way forward for the peace process in Myanmar. But I think the key is we indicated expectations on our side as what we hope to see going forward. Now, we are realistic enough to know that this is not going to be achieved overnight. You know, it'll be achieved. We want to see progress, step by step, continued progress, incremental progress, and we clearly spelled out what our expectations are going forward. First, expansion of space for humanitarian assistance. And we're very pleased that the Foreign Minister of the Philippines, as chair of ASEAN, will be making a humanitarian visit to Myanmar to discuss how we can work with Myanmar on expanding humanitarian access based on needs of people on the ground. Second, we urge further reduction, more reduction of violence, especially the impacts on civilians. We also urge that there be continued inclusive dialogue with all the relevant stakeholders, hoping that this would lead to national reconciliation. And we also would like to see the efforts to create a more conducive political environment, such as further release of political prisoners and further positive development with regard to Dawn Aung San Suu Kyi. Now, I think this is but the first step. We have to continue building upon this process of engagement. It is not a one-off event. And at the same time, we have expectations that we hope the Myanmar side will try to meet, as I noted earlier. But in the end, this going forward, this is going to be a Myanmar-led, Myanmar-owned. We, as friends, as neighbors, as fellow members of ASEAN, because Myanmar is still a member of ASEAN, we are ready to help. We are ready to assist in order that we would like Myanmar to be back in the ASEAN family. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellencies, Madam Secretary and the Special Envoy, and Excellencies, the Deputy Prime Minister. The microphone is there, so I will take turn from this side and the other side. Please state your name and the affiliation. I'll start with this side, the straight time first. Please, Madam.
Good evening, Secretary Lazaro as well as Kun Siasak. Thank you very much for the briefing and update. Got a couple of questions. May Wong from the Straits Times, Singapore Media. My first question to you is, you mentioned a number of times, at least 5 times, about the 5-point consensus. The Myanmar parliamentarians have rejected this 5-point consensus, saying that it is irrelevant today. How do you square with the fact that you're still depending on a 5-point consensus when it's no longer no longer relevant to Myanmar? My second question to you, if you may answer all of the questions that I asked, is how dangerous of a precedent is ASEAN setting by allowing the Myanmar foreign minister to attend this meeting when it has essentially rejected all your important requests and also rejected your request to meet up with Aung San Suu Kyi recently? So how dangerous of a precedent are you setting to tell the rest of the ASEAN members that it doesn't matter, that they can do whatever they want and still have this expanded diplomatic access? And my final question to you is, you mentioned earlier a number of times about this concrete and demonstrable actions that you need to see on their part. Kun Siasak, you outlined some of those actions required. But how are you going to actually keep track and also measure all these achievements in order to consider allowing Min Aung Hlaing to come back to the table? Thank you.
Well, I think we reached a certain point where, it's not about the 5-point consensus. We know that the 5-point consensus remains the main reference point for ASEAN insofar as the situation in Myanmar is concerned. But I think for Thailand, especially as a country next door, we want to think about what is the strategy to implement the 5-point consensus. And in the end, we have to engage, we have to have dialogue. And we're not abandoning our position. And I've made it clear that what are our expectations. We want to see more humanitarian assistance. We're supporting the visit of the chair of ASEAN to look at ways of expanding humanitarian assistance. We urge for the reduction of violence, especially the impacts on civilians. We made that very clear. Third, we call for a more inclusive political dialogue aimed at achieving national reconciliation. And, of course, to create a favorable political environment, release of political prisoners, some more positive developments with regard to Dawn Aung San Suu Kyi. So I don't think in fact, we thought about, we're going further from just repeating about those 5-point consensus. We're thinking about how to implement. And I think we're engaging, but we're not abandoning the principles of the 5-point consensus. So that is, the approach that Thailand has been advocating.
Well, in my case, I just want to respond that in my capacity as the special envoy of the chair to Myanmar, it has always been a basic document as well as discussion point is the 5-point consensus. Stakeholders as well as that of the Myanmar government, we've always used that. And it's really, they reject it or not, I stand pat, and I think ASEAN stands behind the 5-point consensus. Secondly, well, you said that there might be some kind of a danger for the presence of the Myanmar foreign minister. I don't think so. I see it on the contrary. This is the first time, as has been said by Kun Siasak, that we are meeting since 2021, when this started in Brunei. This is the first time we're meeting the foreign minister of Myanmar, and we just, you have heard Kun Siasak and you have heard me said some elements that are moving. Example, the perfect example is the humanitarian mission that I intend to do, and the fact that they are giving, they're open to giving permits to those areas that, they seem to be very, they're very sensitive about. It's already a movement. It can't be done in one stroke or in a certain time. I think it's evolving, and I think all of these engagements is very important.
And, I'm sure that part of the strategy is also to meet with the relevant stakeholders. So we're not just meeting with the foreign minister, but we also have plans to meet with all the key stakeholders as well. So it's not just being one-sided. We want to be even-handed.
Thank you, Excellencies. On the right side, CNA, please.
My name is Saksit Sayasombat, Thailand correspondent for CNA, also Singaporean media. Secretary Lazaro, Deputy Prime Minister Siasak, thank you very much for the briefing as well. We have heard a lot of benchmarks, demonstrated progress, KPIs, and so on. So my first question is there a timeline for that? Is there something where you can see that we expect certain progress to be made by this point in time or not? My second question is that for the AMM, for the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting later this month as well, where you're also going to have leaders and diplomats from other parts of the world coming here as well. What are you going to take from this meeting into the AMM whenever these stakeholders from the broader region are going to ask about Myanmar?
Well, to answer first the second question in the forthcoming AMM PMC, which will be held in Manila in just a few days from now, I think there's a good number of certain points that were raised here that may be part of the discussions that will be held. So again, and then to your question on the benchmarks, I think it's evolving. We want to set dates, but I think it cannot be done. It's a process. Sometimes the process is more important than how it comes out in the conclusion. So it's evolving. We cannot set any dates on timeline, on the benchmarks, and on the forthcoming AMM, there is a good possibility that the points that were raised here may again be raised, and perhaps in a different, perhaps some kind of new inputs that will come in. Thank you.
Well, I don't think we have set any deadline. But we know that the decision on the current status of Myanmar, whereby they are not participating in the summit and at the meetings of the foreign minister, was made by a decision of the ASEAN leaders. So by that token, I think we have this upcoming summit coming towards the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a way, that is the timeline where we will review and look whether there's been substantial progress with regard to the key elements that I have outlined and also the chair has outlined. So no deadline. But we know that this meeting will be at next summit. It will be an important opportunity for us to consider the participation of Myanmar.
Thank you. Ilham, please.
Good evening. My name is Ilham with the Japanese newspaper, the Yomiuri Shimbun. My first question is to Madam Secretary. You have mentioned that ASEAN have shifted its positions on Myanmar. I just like to clarify on that. Can this be considered the first meeting of ASEAN mechanism with Myanmar political representation, especially at the foreign ministerial level? And if you could clarify and elaborate more on what kind of shift will there be in the future, and will there be more engagement with Myanmar, and what kind should we expect? And I actually have a second question to both Madam Secretary and the Foreign Minister, Sihasak. Are there any plan to extend this ASEAN mechanism to have engagement with other regional actors in regard of Myanmar and with the Myanmar Foreign Minister?
I'd like to answer your last question. That's the only thing I remember right now. But to the last question, I think this is something that has to be dealt with ASEAN. And we have not discussed such a situation, but I think this should be ASEAN that should really handle and focus on this, on the issue of Myanmar. But you have your first question is there a shift? You were asking. Well, the shift is the fact that we're meeting with the Myanmar foreign minister is some kind of a shift. And small as it, minor as it is important, because the last meeting that I think that we had a meeting with the Myanmar was in 2021 when the 5-point consensus came out. And now this is it. This is a shift, and I thank Foreign Minister Sihasak for giving this opportunity, for hosting us and making this meeting possible.
Well, it depends on what you mean by shift. If you mean shift from the principles, the key elements in the 5-point consensus, I don't think there's been a shift. But if in terms of shift, you mean engaging, talking, listening, I think we made some shift, right? But I think it's positive. Second, ASEAN remains the main forum to discuss the situation in Myanmar, because Myanmar is a part of ASEAN. But that does not preclude neighboring countries, helping to address the situation in Myanmar as well. Countries sharing common border with Myanmar, Bangladesh, India, China. So ASEAN is at the core, but I think the engagement of neighboring countries sharing common borders with Myanmar is also crucial.
Thank you. I see NHK, please, on the other side. Yeah.
Good evening, Excellencies. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Just 2 questions for me. Napat Pongsawat from NHK. First of all, I'd just like to be candid and ask, what was the latest update provided by the Myanmar delegation on the health of Aung San Suu Kyi? And then secondly, Foreign Minister Sihasak, you've said in the past that Thailand is willing to facilitate dialogues between the Myanmar government and various armed groups along the border. Has these talks gotten more concrete, and was this topic brought up during the discussion today? Thank you.
My recollection of the statement of the Myanmar Foreign Minister on Aung San Suu Kyi is that she's in good health, and that the premise of how he said it is that she is a relative, she's a sister, and therefore we will take care of her, quote unquote.
Yes, during the briefing provided by the Foreign Minister of Myanmar, he assured that she was well taken care of. She had access to all the needed facilities and in good health. But of course, we also made our comment that if the ASEAN Special Envoy could be given the opportunity to meet with Dawn Aung San Suu Kyi, that would be even better, so that we can be able to verify the claims that the foreign ministers made. But I think it's good that he's able to reassure us in front of all of the ASEAN foreign ministers that Dawn Aung San Suu Kyi is being well taken care of. The other question on, we are ready to facilitate dialogue between Naypyidaw and the ethnic groups, especially those along the Thai side of the border. Things are in the works right now, but probably you'll have to wait until these meetings are held.
Thank you, Excellencies. I see the last request. Asahi Shinbun, please, on that side. Yeah.
Hello, it's Boy Park Mo, Asahi Shinbun. Thank you for the opportunity. I have two questions. First is about you're talking about the Myanmar delegation briefing the ASEAN member state, right? So what exactly that Myanmar briefing to ASEAN? What is the topic? What they discuss, and any Myanmar reaction regarding to the ASEAN member state comment? What did Myanmar propose? And second, how ASEAN so far had assessed the Myanmar situation? Thank you.
Well, they gave us a fairly extensive briefing on the current situation, their plans with regard to the peace talks that they're having now with some of the ethnic groups and opposition. And they also brief us on their efforts to crack down on the transnational crime along the border, and especially with regard to the online scams. And I think they also talk about the way forward, and also especially engaging more with the ASEAN countries with regard to the situation in Myanmar. What was the other question?
How the ASEAN have assessed the situation in Myanmar so far?
Well, this is the first discussion, first time that we're engaging. We listen, and then and as I said, we have some concrete expectations with regard to humanitarian assistance, with regard to reduction of violence, with regard to inclusive political dialogue, and with regard to creating a more conducive political environment in Myanmar. So we will be assessing the progress based on these elements.
Okay. One very, very last request. I saw Nikkei here on this left side, the very last question.
Thank you for giving us this kind of opportunity to ask a question. The last question is about how do you see how legitimate the election, also the new government of the Myanmar is now? I think I remember, if I'm correct, in January, Madam Secretary, you mentioned that this election was not legitimate enough to recognize as, of course, legitimate as our organization of ASEAN. So what kind of discussion did you have at the meeting? Also, still, do you think that it's not enough to be recognized as a legitimate election, also the government as well?
Well, from the ASEAN point of view, there are certain countries who have already expressed a possible recalibration of their relations with Myanmar as a result of the recent elections and, of course, the government that was installed. So that has something to do with, in response to your question on the result of the elections. So that is from the ASEAN point of view. So we, as Special Envoy, I adhere to what the ASEAN member states are looking, but of course there are still some ASEAN member states that has had still difficulties in saying that this government is already to be recognized because of certain, again, goes back to the 5-point consensus. So we are still in that situation, but I know that things will move, and I guess, as I said, this is the start of the discussions and the way forward. Thank you.
Well, insofar as Thailand is concerned, they've had the election. I think we have to be forward-looking. What we're looking at is the end result. So we hope that they will continue to build upon the results of the election, to continue with dialogue, to continue with the peace process. Because in the end, what we hope is peace and stability in Myanmar, and that can only come through a process of peace and dialogue. So for us, we're looking ahead, urging them to continue building upon the election, strengthening, putting in place a peace process, a process of dialogue towards the ultimate goal of peace and stability in Myanmar.
Thank you very much, Excellencies. That's the end of the joint press conference. So for the departures of the Excellencies, Madam Secretary and the Special Envoy, and His Excellencies Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Thailand, I ask you to remain seated and where you are to allow for the departures of the Excellencies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so for those of you who wants to work on your articles or whatnot,